So last week, we got a substantial update to Bob Mueller's Russia investigation, and it catalyzed a discussion on social media and in the mainstream media that I think you could really only describe as unhinged. So before we get to the adverse consequences of this announcement, I want to first establish the facts. The New York Times reports on Friday, 13 Russians were indicted by a federal grand jury in Washington on fraud and other charges. Details on their roles in a 3-year campaign to disrupt American democracy have begun to emerge from the indictment, other records, interviews, and press accounts. Operating from St. Petersburg, they churned out falsehoods on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. They promoted Donald J. Trump and denigrated Hillary Clinton. They stole the identities of American citizens. They organized political rallies in several states and hired a Clinton impersonator for one event in West Palm Beach, Florida. Now, in particular, there's one man of interest. His name is Yevgeny Prigozhin, and he runs a company known as the Internet Research Agency, and this company sought to disrupt American politics. According to the indictment, he controlled 2 companies that financed the operations of the Internet Research Agency, a shadowy troll farm created in 2013. It began a so-called translator project in 2014 that targeted Americans and pursued information warfare against the United States. It employed hundreds of people and by the summer of 2016 was spending $1.2 million a month. Now, for more information about the Internet Research Agency, we turn to Brian Barrett of Wired, who explains, so-called specialists allegedly created social media accounts posing as politically active U.S. citizens, limiting their vitriol to a list of relevant topics handed down by management. They worked regular shifts, their output monitored and evaluated both for authenticity, with regular feedback coming from their superiors. They received guidelines on how to maximize engagement down to the ratio of text to graphics to a video in a given post. Now, it should be noted that the Mueller indictment doesn't actually state the extent to which these Russian agents were successful at influencing our election, or if they were able to successfully influence the 2016 election at all, even though they tried. And it does also state that no American citizen purposefully colluded with them to do so. Now, additionally, the indictment alleges that Donald Trump wasn't the only beneficiary of Russian meddling. Apparently, Bernie Sanders and Jill Stein also benefited. So that's basically the facts of the situation. I do think it's important that we don't remain static in our position, and we do accept that, yes, this is now evidence that Russia did try to influence the election. Now, we'll get to what they tried to do specifically in a moment, but when we often hear about the ways in which they tried to influence the election using social media, there were a lot of media outlets that actually described the level of sophistication that they used to actually influence American politics. So let's go ahead and see just how sophisticated this campaign was. So I actually have some images posted by Russian bots. So from left to right, we see a Buff Bernie coloring book. So that's one of the ways they tried to gin up support for Bernie. There was also an event created on Facebook for Texans that want to secede from the United States. And also they posted a meme with Jesus arm wrestling Satan. I'm sure that definitely had an impact on a lot of people's decisions. We also see some anti-Muslim posts, some generally pro-Trump Facebook posts, the same type of stuff you'd see from your conservative uncle. There's some anti-protester memes, and more. Now, when I see that, I'm personally not inclined to believe that those memes had a substantial impact on the outcome of the election or American politics at all, because memes, I don't think, are going to be persuasive enough to change anybody's vote. However, when it comes to Bob Mueller's decision to indict these individuals, I do think he made the right choice because they actually did commit crimes like identity theft. So I am glad that Bob Mueller found out about this, indicted them, and he also uncovered their plot to disrupt American politics, because even if what they did was probably inconsequential, I do think that we shouldn't have any outside influence at all. However, to say that the media has hyped this up would be the understatement of the century, because what Bob Mueller found, the Russian agents that were influencing the election, well, it doesn't really seem to be that big of a deal. And after hearing for now more than a year about just how sophisticated this campaign was to sway the election in favor of Donald Trump, well, turns out it's not that sophisticated after all. As Alexis Madrigal of The Atlantic puts it, it might be nice for Democrats and never-Trumpers to believe that Russia's troll factory brought Donald Trump the 2016 presidential election, but no. But regardless, I do still personally think that this investigation is important. I think that Bob Mueller should continue with it, continue investigating Donald Trump to make sure that he didn't collude with Russia, continue investigating Donald Trump to make sure that there's no money laundering deals, which I think there probably is or potentially could be. And if that's the case, then let's impeach him. But what is really problematic is the response to these indictments. And this isn't something that's new. We've been seeing anti-Russian hysteria since we learned that it was a possibility that Russia might have tried to influence our election. So, for example, Senators John McCain and Jeanne Shaheen actually referred to what Russia did as an act of war. Yes, memes now constitutes an act of war. Senator Angus King called this the most serious attack on the United States since 9/11. The Washington Post published an article after Mueller made his announcement titled, "Trump is ignoring the worst attack on America since 9/11. And the hysteria doesn't stop there, because Representative Jerry Nadler, in an interview with Chris Hayes on MSNBC, literally said this.
My reaction to the news is that this is absolute proof of what we knew all along and what the president has denied, namely that we were attacked. This was a very serious attack against the United States by a hostile foreign power, an attack against our election process, our entire governing process. We know that the attack is continuing, and that our intelligence agencies tell us that it's going to certainly continue through the next election. And the president and the Republicans in the House, for that matter, refuse to do anything about protecting us from an attack. Imagine if FDR had denied that the Japanese attacked us at Pearl Harbor and didn't react. That's the equivalent.
Well, it's a bit of a different thing. I mean,
no, it's not.
They didn't kill anyone.
They didn't kill anyone, but they're destroying our country.
Do you really think it's on? You think it's on par?
Not in the amount of violence, but I think in the seriousness, it is very much on par. This country exists to have a democratic system with a small d. That's what the country's all about, and this is an attempt to destroy that.
So understand what's happening. Our government is trying to make us believe that Russian shitposting in favor of Donald Trump is now on par with tragedies like 9/11 and Pearl Harbor. To say that is absurd. 2,400 Americans died, more than 2,400 Americans died on Pearl Harbor. Nearly 3,000 American citizens were killed on 9/11. And to conflate shitposting with mass death and destruction is absurd. After Pearl Harbor, American citizens had their civil liberties stomped on. Japanese Americans were literally placed in internment camps by FDR, a progressive president. This is the most economically progressive president in American history, but even he bought into hysteria and decided to completely stomp on the civil liberties and civil rights of Japanese Americans. Also, after 9/11, we passed the Patriot Act. We started multiple new wars. We're now using the NSA to spy on American citizens, and we're treating everyone as if they're just as guilty as terrorists. What's going to be the response here in this situation? Well, we already know that the government is using this to justify censorship. Obama created an Orwellian Ministry of Truth before he left office and then handed control over that to Donald Trump. Google, Facebook, and Twitter all announced plans to curtail fake news by introducing changes that affect everyone, people who don't produce fake news, namely independent media outlets. And The Intercept's Glenn Greenwald stops to ask a really important question. If Russia committed an act of war on par with Pearl Harbor and 9/11, should the United States response be similar? He adds, all of this underscores the serious dangers many have pointed to for more than a year about why all this unhinged rhetoric is so alarming. If you really believe that Russia, with some phishing links sent to John Podesta and some fake Facebook ads and Twitter bots, committed an act of war of any kind, let alone one on par with Pearl Harbor and 9/11, then it's inevitable that extreme retaliatory measures will be considered and likely triggered. How does one justify a mere imposition of sanctions in the face of an attack similar to Pearl Harbor or 9/11? doesn't it stand to reason that something much more belligerent, enduring, and destructive be necessary? Do you see where this is going? Do you see why the exaggerated response from Congress and the media is problematic? Now, I get it. Election meddling is bad. It's problematic. But absent from this discussion, people who have spoken out against this the most are ignoring the impact foreign lobbying has on our democracy from governments like Saudi Arabia and Israel. They ignore the impact of money and politics on our democracy. The Koch brothers are literally pledging to spend $400 million on just the 2018 midterms alone. Also, a Princeton University study published by Dr. Gillens and Page found that the United States is now effectively an oligarchy since policy outcomes are only influenced by elites and special interests, and normal Americans have a statistically insignificant impact on policy outcomes. And let's not even try to pretend that our country doesn't meddle in other countries' elections. We've outright overthrown other governments that we disagree with, and even Hillary Clinton herself talked about fixing Palestinian elections in leaked audio. But these so-called crusaders for democracy only care about the integrity of our democracy insofar as it suits their specific political agenda. And now, as a result of the Russian meddling kerfuffle, they're going to use this as justification to further clamp down on our civil liberties, to ramp up the new Cold War to make more money for the military-industrial complex. And why are they responding to it this way? Well, because some Russian bots posted memes. They tried to influence the election covertly by acting as pro-Trump operatives on social media. Hillary Clinton, I don't know if you all forgot about this, but her super PAC, Correct the Record, literally spent $1 million paying online trolls. We need to be having a nuanced debate, but that's not happening. Our elected officials, the mainstream media, they're all jumping to hysteria to make us seem like this is literally on par with tragedies like Pearl Harbor and 9/11. I personally don't think that these memes probably had a very big impact on the outcome of the 2016 election. I think it's evident that Hillary Clinton ran one of the worst campaigns, completely bereft of policy in American history. But with that being said, if you care about this, that's fine. What you can do to make sure that we protect the integrity of the vote especially is call your elected official, call your representative, and urge them to move towards paper ballots. That makes sure that we protect our democracy from these machines owned by private companies that are vulnerable. But understand that that's not even what we're alleging. Even though we know that Russia at least tried to hack into voting machines, there's no evidence that they were even able to successfully hack in, and there's definitely no evidence that votes were flipped. So to suggest that Russia stole the election or even influenced the election is a stretch. But even if you disagree with that assessment, do not let the government take advantage of you. Do not let them use this situation as a justification to restrict even more civil liberties, to censor voices that they disagree with. But unfortunately, I'm afraid it's too late. This segment of the Humanist Report was brought to you by 7coffeeroasters.com. They're a minority-owned small business in Seattle, and they specialize in roasting unique and delicious coffee that's not actually roasted until you've placed your order. And the best part is that they actually ship out all orders within 24 hours, so you get your coffee and it still tastes fresh when it arrives. And to boot, they're also a progressive company that pays their workers a living wage and actually cares about the country. So to support them and experience the deliciousness of their coffee, you can check out 7coffeeroasters.com.